Hello, my name is Leonard, and this is the Symantec Enterprise Vault 10 for Exchange Administration, Lesson 9, Managing Client Access with Vault Cache and Virtual Vault. We've been working through 3 lessons here that dealt with how the clients are going to access their archives once we've set up the mailbox archiving. In this lesson, we're going to look at Vault Cache and Virtual Vault. These work in conjunction with the Outlook add-in that we had discussed in Lesson 7. In this lesson, we'll do an overview of what is Vault Cache and what is Virtual Vault. We'll go through and look at how we configure the Vault Cache and the Virtual Vault. And then we'll actually look at, once we do have Vault Cache and Virtual Vault configured, how we can go through and look at the different options and customize the interaction with Vault Cache and Virtual Vault. So first is going to be our overview of the Vault Cache and Virtual Vault. We'll talk about how Vault Cache enables the users to work offline in Microsoft Outlook while remaining synchronized with the Enterprise Vault environment. So first, let's talk about Vault Cache. Vault Cache allows the users to continue working with their archived email if I have no network connectivity, or maybe even in a scenario where I have low bandwidth. And therefore, it would be nice to have a copy of the archived mail on the local computer so I did not have to go across that low-speed connection to be retrieving items that have been archived. So we're going to go through and look at how Vault Cache can help us in both of these types of scenarios. So how does Vault Cache work? Well, typically we have a archiving environment set up. We talked about this in the mailbox archiving chapters. We have our Microsoft Exchange server, which is where the mailbox exists. And on our Enterprise Vault server, we set up the archive associated with that particular mailbox. However, when the user is connected to the Exchange environment using the Outlook client, typically, they're going to be connected with an online connection. And if they have been configured, though, to use offline folders, they will synchronize their mailbox with that offline folder. Now, in the archiving world, the way that we're going to kind of give you that same type of functionality is that on the server, we, in an earlier lesson, talked about what was called the server cache. We configured that server cache, and we specifically talked about the idea of setting up that server cache for use with Vault Cache. We will be re-looking at, in this particular lesson, where you go through and do that configuration. But this cache on the server is going to be a temporary storage for the data that we need in order to get a copy of your archive over to the client. Now, this copy may not be a complete copy. And what will happen is that there is 2 separate sections of this copy. There's what's called the metadata cache, which has the header information associated with the archive. And then we have the actual content cache, which needs to be downloaded to the client, which is the actual content of your archives. And what will happen is that if you are in certain situations, you'll be able to go directly from your offline folder to that Vault Cache to be able to access your items. So with the Outlook add-in, this gives you the capability to be in various scenarios going directly to that Vault Cache to retrieve archived items. What types of features does Vault Cache bring into the table? It provides that offline access to an archive and the items with it. It provides a way for those offline users to both be able to open and view their items, forward and reply to the archived items, search and find the archived items using the typical search types of tools, such as the basic search, browser search, Archive Explorer. And we will be looking at these different search tools in a later lesson. It also provides what we call preemptive caching to try to minimize the amount of bandwidth that's used up when we are downloading that content cache. We can actually take some of the messages and anticipate the fact that they will be archived, go ahead and move them from the mailbox into the Vault Cache so that I do not have to download that particular item from the Vault Cache when I reconnect. We'll also look at synchronization of the cache as your archive changes. When items are deleted, new items are added to your archive. When you delete items out of your archives through Outlook, how we can make sure that all those are synchronized. There are some limitations, though, when you are working with Vault Cache. While you're offline, the Vault Cache doesn't support you doing a store in Vault, and that's because the messaging system is offline. There's no connection there. You also cannot do a restore from Vault, because again, typically when you're talking about Vault Cache, you're not connected, so therefore you will not be able to get the original item from the Vault to restore it. Now the next piece is called Virtual Vault. Now Vault Cache is an independent piece, and you can configure and use just Vault Cache, or you can add the additional functionality of Virtual Vault. Virtual Vault does not work without Vault Cache. You must have the Vault Cache configured in order to be able to use the Virtual Vault. The idea of the Virtual Vault, though, is to give you a native Outlook interface to your archive. So it will appear as just an additional folder in Outlook, and when you want to archive items, you can just drag items into it and drop it into this particular Virtual Vault, and all the archiving will take place in the background for you automatically during the synchronization. And it will allow the user to be able to access their vault effectively as if it was a PST or an OST offline file. And also, if we're going through with the Virtual Vault, it gives you the capability of synchronizing the Vault Cache both from the Enterprise Vault server to the client, as well as from the client back to the Enterprise Vault server, which is that bi-directional synchronization. Let's look to some basic architecture of the Vault Cache. So in a Vault Cache environment, it provides that offline cached access to the clients, and it is a database of the information that actually is needed for the Vault Cache to work. So in the Vault Cache, it's composed of different components. The first component is called the Metadata Cache, the MDC. This is also called the header information, and it's going to be available in order to allow us to synchronize the headers associated with the items that have been placed in our archive. Then we have a section called the Metadata Cache Manager, the MDCM. This is going to be responsible for containing a list of the archives that have been cached, managing the metadata caches, which discovers the archives that the users have permissions to access and manages the associated metadata caches accordingly. It contains a scheduling agent, which enables the metadata synchronization or header synchronization, and it implements the client interface operations. Also, as part of the Vault Cache, we have the Content Cache, and this Content Cache is responsible for actually downloading the actual content of the messages that are in your archive. And this is called the content synchronization to perform that download of that content cache. The clients themselves are going to either connect to the Vault Cache through offline shortcuts or the offline Archive Explorer or through that virtual vault. So again, this shows you that you have to have client cache in order to be able to configure and use Virtual Vault. What are some of the characteristics of that content cache? You, in an Outlook environment, may have access to multiple archives. So for each archive that you're going to have access to, you will have a separate metadata cache, that MDC. So therefore, what the content cache does is that we only need to have one content cache no matter how many different metadata caches you have available. So therefore, I'm only going to have one location and one database that's keeping track of all the individual actual content that these different various header files or metadata cache has for the different archives that you're going to access them. This content cache has a trawler component. This trawler component is called preemptive archiving, and it gives us the capability of determining if an item, while we are offline, is going to come up for archiving. If it is going to come up for archiving, it makes sense for me to move it from my offline file folder and to the Vault Cache. The basic characteristics of the content cache structure is that it contains a maximum of these *.db files. These are the file extensions that are actually being attached to the individual files. These .db file extension types of files for an internal structure look exactly the same as a PST file. They just have a different extension on them. By default, the content cache is set up to be a maximum size of 500 megabytes. You can configure that. And you're going to set up and have what's called a download job. Now we're going to see in the user interface for the Vault Cache that the content cache download is called a content synchronization. As part of this download, we're going to create a download job, and this download job is responsible or will result in a single database file being downloaded. It will download newer items as a priority before the older items, and it will remove the database file from the server, and that's that server cache location we keep referencing, after it has been downloaded to the client. And these items are either delivered as part of that database download for both an initial synchronization and incremental synchronization or downloads, or as the original message file format for an immediate download. Now we're going to be going through some different scenarios of using Vault Cache, and it will make more sense about that when it immediately downloads it versus when it's going to do an initial or incremental download. Now these physical .db files are located in a location under the Vault Store installation file for the particular profile that you're logged in as, and there will be a folder called Store Key Directory, which is unique to your particular profile in Outlook. You can change the root directory structure using the desktop policies. Next thing we want to look at are some different modes that Vault Cache operates in. And based upon the mode is going to determine how you access the items in Vault Cache, as well as how items can be added to the Vault Cache. We've basically broken these down into some categories to help explain different scenarios when Vault Cache comes into play. First, we have offline operation. We also have online operation. And then we have the Exchange cached mode. And this is configured through the Outlook properties for your profile. And then we also have the Archive Explorer being used with the Vault Cache. Let's kind of explain these offline modes here, or these operation modes, in a little bit more detail. Here we have a table, and in this particular table you can see that if I am online, that implies that I'm connected to the Exchange server. So therefore all the operations will be done through the Exchange server for the Outlook client. However, the Enterprise Vault functionality for your archived items, because again, if we're connected to the Exchange server, the assumption is that we're also connected to the Enterprise Vault server, it will retrieve all the items from the Enterprise Vault server. If we are offline, I'll be working only from the offline file, the .ost file. The offline folders are enabled and have been synchronized. For the Enterprise Vault, again, typically when I'm in offline mode, the assumption is I don't have a reliable connection to the Exchange, which means I don't have a reliable connection to Enterprise Vault. So therefore, the Enterprise Vault will be retrieved from the Vault Cache. Now, I can be connected, but be in offline mode, or connected and using my offline or OST file. In that particular scenario, periodically, that offline file will synchronize itself with the Exchange server, and that's all handled through Outlook. However, for the Enterprise Vault functionality, if I search for an item in Vault Cache, then I want to retrieve it from Vault Cache. That would be the most quickest way to get that item. However, if it's not available in Vault Cache, I will try to retrieve the item from the Enterprise Vault server. I will place it in something called a download list, and if there is actually a current connection while I am connected, I will go ahead and access that file and download it. However, if not, then I can go ahead and just retrieve it from the Vault Cache. Now, if I am disconnected, again, it implies that I am working with the OST file, but when I'm disconnected, I know I don't have a connection to the Exchange server, which means I know I don't have a connection to the Enterprise Vault server. So therefore, the items retrieved from Outlook will be done either from the offline files for items that are not archived, and for items that have been archived, they will be retrieved via the Vault Cache. And the little asterisk there represents the difference between connected and disconnected. Both of those are referencing when we are in Exchange cached mode. Now, one of the connection modes that we haven't talked about yet is the Archive Explorer. That was what we were talking about in the operation modes. We will be visiting that particular operation mode a little bit later in the lesson. So let's try to visualize these different connection modes, if you will. So in this first animation, we're going to go through and look at using the email access. We have Vault Cache configured. However, we are online, but we have enabled the capability of having offline folders. So therefore, our assumption initially is that we have a connection, we're online. So therefore, the offline folders have the ability to synchronize with the Exchange server mailbox folders. Also, what should happen with the Vault Cache environment is that the users will access their mail items from the Exchange server, and if an item has been archived, then I will tell that particular information to be stored in the server cache and download it via the content cache part of the Vault Cache onto the client. Also, since we are connected, we will be able to periodically synchronize the information that's in the archive with the information that's in the Vault Cache. The information will be temporarily stored on the server-side cache and then downloaded to the Vault Cache if anything needs to be changed. We also have preemptive archiving available. This preemptive archiving is available where we talked about taking information from the offline folders that are available for archiving and moving it into the Vault Cache. However, in this scenario, we will not be using the preemptive archiving. And again, because we are online, the assumption is that I can go directly to the mailbox and synchronize the offline folders, as well as be able to retrieve items directly from the Enterprise Vault server. So therefore, when I am accessing these items online, they're directly accessed, anything that's been archived from the Enterprise Vault server. If we are using shortcuts in our offline folders, we will not be performing any shortcut checking, and that shortcut checking is checking to determine if I have a shortcut for an item that is in the offline folder where I do not have a corresponding item in the Vault Cache. The next example we're going to look at is that concept of working with Vault Cache and being offline. And in this particular example, there's no connection to either Exchange or Enterprise Vault. So therefore, if I have something that has not been archived, I will access that from the offline folder. And if I do have something that has been archived, I will access that through the Outlook add-in and the Vault Cache. Now, the assumption here is that the item does exist in the Vault Cache. Vault Cache is not necessarily a complete copy of what was in your archive. So therefore, if something isn't in the Vault Cache, you may not be able to retrieve that item when you are offline. And that particular item will be added to a download list. And we'll look at that concept of how the download list comes into play a little bit later in this particular lesson. However, we will still do shortcut checking, which means that if I do try to archive something in the offline folders, it will create that shortcut, and it'll see if there is a shortcut in the offline folder that I do not have the corresponding item in the Vault Cache, and it will add those items to that download list as well. Now, if I'm using the mail access when I'm connected, and again, when I use the term connected, the implication is that I am using the Exchange cached mode, and we'll show you how you can determine if you're in Exchange cached mode, looking at the properties of your profile in Outlook a little bit later in this lesson. But if I am connected, again, that implies that I do have a connection to the Exchange server as well as a connection to the Enterprise Vault server. And again, the idea here is that once I've got that connection to the Enterprise Vault server, I will download the content cache into the Vault Cache as well as synchronize that header information. So if I'm going through and I am connected, but I've been configured to use the Exchange cache mode, when I go and look for an archived item, I will look for it in the offline folder. However, again, because I am connected to the Exchange server, that offline folder will be periodically synchronized with the Exchange server mailbox. If I try to access an item from something that has been archived, I will use the Outlook add-in and try to find it in Vault Cache. So even though I'm connected to the Enterprise Vault server in this particular scenario, I'm still going to try to retrieve the item from the Vault Cache first. If it's not available in the Vault Cache, I will add it to the download list, and then because I am actually connected to the archive, periodically that download list will be updated to the archive, which will move it into the server cache, which will then download that particular environment. Now, in this particular scenario, I will be doing shortcut checking to see if something does have a shortcut in the offline file, if that item is in Vault Cache, and if it's not, I will periodically try to download that information to keep the vault cache up to date. If I'm disconnected though, and again this is using the Exchange server cache mode, if I'm disconnected, I know that I don't have a connection to the Exchange server or the Enterprise Vault server, so therefore if I'm accessing mail, it'll have to be done through the offline folders, and if I'm accessing items that have been archived, it will be through the Vault cache. And again, if I'm accessing these items through the Vault cache, if it doesn't exist there, that item will be added to the download list. Now, we've been talking about this concept of preemptive archiving. So let's look at what would happen if I didn't have preemptive archiving. If I didn't have preemptive archiving, I'm disconnected as the user, even though I've got the Outlook add-in installed and I've configured it to support Vault Cache. I'm going to go to my mailbox item. The mailbox archiving task runs, so therefore it's replaced as a shortcut on the mailbox, and then that item is moved into the archive. Once that item has been moved into the archive, the user has to connect at some point in order to be able to get the information from the archive into the server-side cache and then download that content into the Vault Cache environment. And again, this is using bandwidth to do that synchronization. Well, with preemptive archiving set up, we've got the capability of having the offline folder know when an item becomes eligible for archiving. So when that particular item becomes eligible for archiving, and you can configure how often or how far in advance you want to do this, it will move that particular item into the Vault Cache. So the next time that I do connect to the Exchange server, if that item has been changed to a shortcut, it will be updated in my offline folder to a shortcut, but in the archive environment, it will know that due to the preemptive caching, that item already exists in Vault Cache, so therefore I will not have to perform a content synchronization, which is also the same thing as our content download. We did mention that using Vault Cache does give you the capability of updating deletions from your environment. So while I was disconnected from the network, if I went and deleted a shortcut, which also deleted the corresponding item in the archive, the next time that I am connected to the system, I will do a header or metadata cache synchronization, and I will then delete that particular item, both the metadata cache and the content cache, from the particular client. Now, we've been alluding to this download list concept. So the idea is, again, based upon the configuration settings associated with the Vault Cache size or the server-side cache, I may not have everything in the Vault Cache. So therefore, I may need to periodically access items that have been archived but they're not in the Vault Cache. So what happens is the Outlook add-in will add this item to the download list. So once it's been added to the download list, the next time that I actually connect, the download list will be read, and the items that are in the download list will be given priority over all the other items as part of the content synchronization or the content download. So now that I've looked at what is Vault Cache, what is Virtual Vault, and I've gone through and looked at the basic functionality of Vault Cache and how that's set up, let's go through and look at the configuration options that we need to do in order to be able to configure Vault Cache, and then if we decide to add on Virtual Vault, how to do that as well. The client prerequisites: first, you must install the Enterprise Vault Outlook add-in on the client. If you are using the Microsoft Outlook offline folders, you must have configured that and done an initial synchronization. Also, you must be running the Microsoft Background Intelligent Transfer Service, or BITS. Again, we're going to try to do as much of these synchronizations as possible in the background. So that's why we decided, as part of our metadata synchronization, which is called a header synchronization, or our content cache downloads, which are called a content synchronization, we can do it in the background using the Background Intelligent Transfer Service, or BITS. Now, we had been alluding to the Exchange cache mode. To use the Exchange cache mode, you have to go into your particular account profile settings. You go into your Exchange server settings, and you'll see under the Exchange server name, there is an option or checkbox to use cached Exchange mode. So whenever we reference the concept of using the Exchange cache mode, this option must be checked. And that gives you the capability of having those offline or OST files when you are not connected. To configure the Enterprise Vault cache, you're going to go through and verify the transaction history setting, and we'll look at what that is and talk about what it does for us in a moment. You also want to make sure that the Enterprise Vault server has the server cache configured. Now, we talked about this back in Lesson 3 as one of the initial configuration things that we wanted to do in preparation for mailbox archiving. But again, you want to make sure that it is in fact configured. You want to make sure that you have your Exchange desktop policies configured for Vault Cache and the settings that you want associated with Vault Cache. And then you can also, for the Outlook client, determine what things are going to be available when you do perform or work with your Vault Cache environment. So first we said we wanted to look at the transaction history. So here we're looking at the property page, and this is from the Enterprise Vault Administration Console. So this is on the Enterprise Vault server piece. We've opened up the properties of our site, which is named EV Site, and we've gone to the Archive Settings tab. At the bottom of the Archive Settings tab, we can determine how long we wish to store what we call our transaction history. This transaction history stores all the archiving information that has occurred since the last metadata content synchronization. And again, this is the header synchronization. Now, the metadata content incremental synchronization makes use of each of the archive's transaction histories stored in the relevant Vault Store data to determine how much data actually needs to be transferred or archived. And you can set the time period that this history is retained under the setting that is displayed on the screen. Next, we said we wanted to verify that the server cache has been configured. So we've changed properties pages here. We're now looking at the Enterprise Vault server, EV Server 1, and we've gone to the cache tab, and you can see that you can specify the location and the size. And again, just as a reminder for the size, this is used by other functionalities. It is used as the temporary storage for large index search returns, as well as some of the file system archiving functionality as well. So make sure that you have correctly sized this maximum cache size. And then you can also specify when you are using the Vault cache for both the metadata or header synchronization, as well as the content or content synchronization, how many connections you want to establish to perform those synchronizations. Next, we said you want to configure the desktop policy that is associated with Vault Cache. So in this case here, we've opened up a desktop policy named Laptop Users. We've gone to the Vault Cache tab, and you can see that we have, in fact, made a check that says Make Vault Cache Available for Users. This is how we enable the users to have access to Vault Cache. So this is set up, again, based upon a desktop policy. Now, under the Make Vault Cache Available for Users, you have two different options. You can specify to automatically enable or to allow the users to decide. We will show you later what the user will see if you allow the users to decide. If you do not allow the users to decide, you can select the automatically enable, which means the next time that they connect or open Outlook, the Vault Cache will automatically be enabled in the background. Now, for our example, we're going to go through and look at the thing that's going to provide you with more prompts, which is allow users to decide, and we'll show you the individual dialog boxes that the user will see when they are configuring Vault Cache. You also have the option, as part of this Vault Cache desktop policy configuration, to specify the maximum use of the initial free space for your size of the Vault Cache. Now here, when we talk about Vault Cache, this is the client-side Vault Cache. And you can also either specify it as initial free space or a maximum size value. You can also specify a content strategy for the content cache location. You cannot store any items in cache. You can store all items. And again, as a reminder, even though you select the option to store all items, based upon the server-side cache, based upon the client-side cache size, based upon your content strategy, you may not actually see everything in the content cache, but you're saying that you want it to try to put everything in there if at all possible. And then you also have the option of storing only the items that that particular user opens. And again, that would be the items that would be added to that download list that we talked about earlier in the lesson. Also notice that you do get to see which features are available based upon using Vault Cache. And these can be things such as the ability to synchronize Vault Cache, to see the Vault Cache properties, and you can either enable it, which means it'll be available on the menu bar, or for the synchronize, you also have the availability of putting it on the toolbar. Now there is an option there at the bottom about Virtual Vault. We're going to save that for our discussion of configuring Virtual Vault. Also on the advanced settings for your desktop policy, you can go to the list settings from, open that up and select the Vault Cache, and you can specify some different advanced settings. We have one highlighted. Do you want to force it to have an offline store to be available before you use Vault Cache? Do you want to set the time that the preemptive archiving takes place in advance? Also, we talked about that root folder location being the user's profile by default, but you could change that. Those are the different types of settings that are here. Again, a reminder about setting up and using these advanced settings. You can go to the online help to get additional information about the individual settings and what their values imply, as well as using the administrator's guide. Last thing we needed to do was to configure the actual Outlook client. And again, remember, you've installed the Outlook add-in client. If you haven't done that for Enterprise Vault, you won't have access to this. And if the user, if we had it set up to enable Vault Cache for the users and to prompt the user or ask the user if they want to configure it, you've got two options to begin with. You can set up the Vault Cache now. That will happen on the first time you open Outlook. Or you can say that you do not wish to set it up at this time, and we'll show you a little bit later where you can go through the menu options to run through this wizard at a later time. But we're going to assume that we want to set it up now. So we click the next button, and the next thing that it talks to us about is applying an age limit. So we can set what the maximum age is for automatically downloading the items. Once again, the thought process is most commonly if I am offline, I'm going to be accessing the items that are most recent. The older items, I really don't access them very often. So you can set this maximum age for the automatic download. Next, you can also determine whether or not you want to be able to monitor the download progress, and we'll show you what the download progress icons look like when you are doing a download once you have set this up. And now you are effectively configured. So I just hit finish, and it will actually start an initial header synchronization and an initial content cache synchronization. Now we're going to switch over to, if you have decided to configure Vault Cache as well as use Virtual Vault, we're going to go back and look at getting the Virtual Vault component installed as well. So going back to the desktop policy, as we'd shown earlier, on the Vault Cache tab down to the very bottom, you have an option to make the Virtual Vault available to users. So once you place that check mark in there, the users will be able to use Virtual Vault. To configure the advanced settings for the Virtual Vault piece, again, you go to the desktop policies, the advanced tab, but this time under the list settings for, you click on the Virtual Vault option, and again, you can go through and use the help system to get more detail about these settings, as well as the administrator's guide. Here, we're just pointing at a couple different settings that are configured by default, which is one, can the users archive their items? We mentioned earlier that one of the functions about Virtual Vault was giving you a folder type of an interface, and we'll see that here in a moment, that you can just drag items into and have them be automatically archived. Well, if you didn't have this set to yes, then the users wouldn't be able to have the items that are put in the Virtual Vault actually archived. Also, can the users delete items from the Virtual Vault? And can the users move items around inside the Virtual Vault? These are all configured as yes by default. One of the issues about the hard delete, do realize that the site property setting can override what you have configured here in the desktop policy. And then also, if you do use the can users copy items within their archive and you change it from its default no to yes, you do have to worry about the issue of having multiple copies of that particular item in the Virtual Vault. Okay, once we have configured both the Vault Cache and or having the Virtual Vault add-on to that, again, you must have Vault Cache in order to have Virtual Vault. What is it going to look like in the Outlook environment based upon whether or not you're using Outlook 2007 or using Outlook 2010? First, the Vault Cache menu options and tools that are going to be available if you're using Outlook 2007. Again, the menu options will be added to the Tools menu. You will have a Enterprise Vault at the very bottom there by default. If you have been asked to enable the Vault Cache, you will see that you have an option of Enable Vault Cache. If I've already enabled Vault Cache, going through that wizard that we showed earlier, or if they had it set up such that it automatically enabled Vault Cache, when you go to the Enterprise Vault menu option, you will only see Synchronize and Vault Cache properties. If you do have the ability, or you went through the desktop policy and said that you were able to show the synchronizing of the Vault Cache, this shows you a blow up of the icon that would be on the Outlook add-in toolbar in Outlook 2007. If we're looking at Outlook 2010, and you have the synchronize option available, that will show up as a separate section on the Enterprise Vault tab of the Office ribbon. And you can see that that's available there. And then if you need to do additional actions, you can go back to your file option on the Enterprise Vault section. And if you open that up, you can see that you'll have the option to enable the Vault Cache. Again, that's if it was to prompt the user to do it. The configure will be grayed out until after you've enabled it. If you've already enabled it, or if they set it up to automatically enable Vault Cache, then the only thing that you will see on the File tab under Enterprise Vault will be the Configure Vault Cache option. Now, if Vault Cache is synchronizing, again, we have two different types of synchronization, and we'll look at that here in a moment when we're looking at the details of the synchronization process. You can do what's called a header synchronization, which is actually doing the metadata cache synchronization, or you can do the content synchronization, which is actually downloading the content cache. You can set this up to happen automatically, and then you also have the option, if you've been given permission, to manually synchronize this. If, in fact, the Vault Cache is in the process of synchronizing and you're looking at the details, you'll see the icon that you see on the screen here. It'll have the little blue and green connectors between the Vault Cache and the client machine, and that little white dash will be going around in circles to let you know that it is actively occurring. We're also going to look at the issue of clicking on details to be able to see more information about the actual synchronization here in just a moment. Now, if you click on Synchronize the Vault Cache, either through the Outlook 2007 icon, which is on the left, or the Outlook 2010 icon, which is on the right, you'll get a pop-up dialog box that says that Enterprise Vault is still synchronizing your Vault Cache, and if you would like to keep track of that progress, you can go into the tools and look at the Vault Cache properties to see that. So let's go and look at the Vault Cache properties, which will come up when you click on the details. Here you can see the status tab of the Vault Cache properties, and it will tell you the status of your last synchronization. So hopefully everything worked for both your metadata synchronization or header synchronization, as well as your content synchronization, and you'll get this nice green check mark, and it'll tell you when the last successful synchronization was. It will also tell you if you are currently connected to the Enterprise Vault server. Now, if something did go wrong, you will see the icon that's displayed, the big red X there, and it will give you a reason for why the synchronization failed. In this particular example, the synchronization failed because we were not connected to the Enterprise Vault server. That's not the only reason that the synchronization could fail for, and not the only message that you may see there. Now, you will notice here in the bottom of the Vault Cache properties, we also have the ability to suspend the synchronization. If you click on the Suspend Synchronization, the status bar will come up, and the status will display that the synchronization was suspended by a user, when it was in fact suspended, and the actual button will switch over to say Resume instead of Suspend. If the synchronization was suspended and for some reason I couldn't actually reconnect, you will get this icon that says that it was suspended by the user, but we're not currently connected to the Enterprise Vault server, so therefore we cannot resume the synchronization process. Now, on the Vault Cache properties, if we move over to the Details tab, you can see that I can, in fact, initiate a manual synchronization here by clicking on the Synchronize Now button. You also have the option on the Details tab of viewing the header synchronization. Now, again, looking at the architecture of Vault Cache, this is the metadata content synchronization, or sorry, metadata cache synchronization. So it gives you the vaults that you have access to see and the current status of that metadata cache synchronization. Also, you can go through and see the details of the content synchronization, and this is where you're actually downloading the content cache to the client. And it will show you the number of items to download. The number of items to archive will only show up if you have the virtual vault configured. The number of items in the cache will give you the status of the items once they've been downloaded. It'll tell you your current cache size and what you have your maximum cache size set to. Then you can move over to the Options tab for the Vault Cache properties, and you can configure a maximum amount of size to use. And again, this is on the client side. You can also specify how long you wish to wait. Normally, when Outlook first opens up, it's going to be doing all kinds of things to try to synchronize Outlook with the Microsoft Exchange server. So you may want to wait a little while before you actually add on to that the processes necessary to start the synchronization of the Vault Cache. So in this particular example, we're going to wait 3 minutes to do that. Now, periodically, you may be working with multiple archives. So in your particular Enterprise Vault environment, you may have access to multiple archives. Well, if you're going to be working with multiple archives, you may still want to be able to have access to those additional archives offline, just like you do with your environment. So therefore, you may want to set up Vault Cache for those additional vaults or archives. And in this particular case here, if you do have permission to do this, which means that you've gone into the desktop properties and changed it so that you can see these additional vaults, you will go through and have a new tab. You'll notice in the previous slides, we did not have a Vaults tab, nor did we have a Virtual Vaults tab. So I've configured it so that you can now see those. It will show you who your current mailbox is, which in this example is Diana Palmer's, and it will give you a list of the additional vaults that you can synchronize and use the Vault Cache with. So for Diana Palmer here, you can go through and have access to Parveen Khan, Rita Jones, and Graham Smith, but for whatever reason, Diana Palmer has decided that they only want to synchronize Parveen Khan's archive. If you go through and have the virtual vault configured for your settings, you go through and you have the option of seeing it as an additional folder or folder container in Outlook. So down in the lower right there, you can see that I had Diana Palmer set up to use Virtual Vault, and the only folder that currently has anything archived in it in Diana Palmer's vault is the inbox. So it displays those items. Now in the Virtual Vault, even if you are configured for shortcuts, it will not display any shortcuts. The idea here is that we're trying to move away from, for the user, seeing that there's something different about these items. We want your users to think that they're just a regular mail item. It can display the full contents. It won't display the shortcut contents like it had earlier when we were working at it. And it does give you the capability of doing the standard reply to and forward options. Now, if I do decide that I wish to archive items by dragging them from my normal Outlook folders into my vault, all I have to do is drag them into the vault. Now, again, we may not be connected when this is occurring, because remember, Virtual Vault is working on top of Vault Cache, which means I could be disconnected. So what happens is that I take the items from wherever you drag them to, and I move them into my Search Folders section. So this is basically telling it that it's available for synchronization the next time that there is a connection and synchronization can occur. Now, one of two things can actually happen for the synchronization. I can have items that I am ready to archive, and in this example here, I dragged 2 items from my regular mailbox into my inbox, and both of those were available for archiving, so therefore it moved them in the search folders into the To Archive folder. However, if there was something that was happening that I did not have the ability to archive those items, it would move them into the Could Not Archive folder. Now, if you do get something in the Could Not Archive folder, the next time that you are connected, you can try to move that item from the Could Not Archive into the To Archive to see if the synchronization can actually archive those items. If you are configured to, again, have access to multiple vaults, you can also go through and set up which of those particular vaults that you've configured for Vault Cache you wish to include in your Outlook environment with Virtual Vault. So we've specified that we're going to be, in this example, using Parveen Khan. We go to the Virtual Vault tab, and you'll see Parveen Khan in the list. So we place a check mark there to say that we wish to have a Virtual Vault for her archive as well. Notice that I still do not see Rita Jones and Graham Smith in the list, because you must have Vault Cache configured in order to be able to configure the Virtual Vault for that particular archive. Once I've done that, when I go back into my Outlook environment, I will see a separate folder or vault using Parveen Khan's name, just like we had when we configured our particular archive for Virtual Vault as well. So if I have the right permissions for the archive, I'll be able to see those items in the archive and have all the permissions that I would have had on that archive if it had been in the regular mailbox folders, but now it's just being represented in Outlook through the Virtual Vault interface. One of the things that we did talk about as far as being able to access the items in our Vault Cache when we were disconnected was the Archive Explorer. We can use the Archive Explorer to display the Vault Cache folders and the archived items that they do contain. It will honor any setting that Vault Cache has been configured for, such as the date range. When we are disconnected, the Archive Explorer will use that metadata cache that's in the Vault Cache to actually display the information from the Vault Cache. Now, if you're using Archive Explorer, shortcuts are optional. If you do not have Archive Explorer for your main mailbox, you need to have shortcuts turned on for the offline Archive Explorer. Now, again, in Virtual Vault, they will still show up without the shortcuts. This is for the non-Virtual Vault environment. So in this lesson, we learned what Vault Cache was and what Virtual Vault were and how they are incorporated into our Outlook environment through our Outlook add-ins. We identified the different modes in which they can be operated. We also learned how to configure our Vault Cache and Virtual Vault environment. And we also learned how to use the Vault Cache and Virtual Vault and our search options, specifically the Archive Explorer. Our reference materials include our Administrative Console Help, the Installing and Configuring Guide, our Setting Up Exchange Server Archiving Guide, the Administrator's Guide, and the Symantec Enterprise Vault Guide for Microsoft Outlook users. And this brings us to the end of Lesson 9.